Whispering cobblestones. Last summer, I was traveling solo through Italy. After checking out most of the big tourist spots, I decided to explore some lesser-known parts of an old city. Places that locals recommended if you wanted a more authentic feel. One local mentioned a narrow cobblestone alley tucked away near the edge of the old town. It didn't show up in photos or reviews, but oddly enough, there was a highly rated restaurant pinned at the end of that path. Curious, I followed the map and made my way there one afternoon. The alley was shadowed, even in broad daylight, sandwiched between tall, time-worn buildings that leaned inward like they were whispering to each other. The air felt unnaturally cool. It was quiet. No cars, no chatter, just my footsteps echoing faintly against the stones. Then I realized there were more footsteps than there should have been. At first, I thought I was being paranoid, but I swear, I could hear a second pair of shoes, sharp, measured steps behind me. I stopped walking. The sound stopped too. I turned around. Nobody. No tourists, no locals, just the narrowing alley behind me. I started walking again. The click, click of leather soles resumed. Definitely not the rubber soles of my sneakers. The second pair was slower than mine, just slightly off rhythm. To prove I wasn't losing it, I started recording a video on my phone. I held it low, lens pointed behind me, and kept walking for about 30 seconds. Once I turned a corner into a wider street, I stopped and played the video back. No one was there, but the audio, the footsteps were loud and clear, distinct from mine. And right before I turned the corner, there was something else. A voice, software, barely audible. It whispered, "Where?" in a breathy, crumbling tone, like wind over broken glass. That was enough. I left the area and went back to my hotel. That night, I played the video again. Same steps, same whisper. But this time, I noticed something that wasn't there before. Just before I turned the corner. In the far edge of the frame, a shadow flickered across the wall. Too far to see clearly, but it moved exactly in time with the phantom footsteps. It wasn't there in the first playback. I swear it wasn't. I tried uploading the video to my cloud account. File corrupted. Wouldn't open again after that. I checked the restaurant pin that led me there in the first place. It was gone. The spot still existed on the map, but there were no listings, no reviews, like it had never been there. And here's the part I can't shake. Right before I turned that corner, for just a moment, I had the strongest feeling that I passed someone. I didn't see their face, but it felt like we brushed shoulders. Even now, in dreams, I sometimes see myself walking through that alley again. But I'm not me. I'm watching from behind, following, at a slight delay. And just before I wake up, I always hear the same thing. This way, right behind me, right in my ear. And in the dream, I always smile, but I never remember choosing to. The light in the abandoned tunnel. A few years ago, I spent a couple of months backpacking through South America. Toward the end of the trip, I ended up in a remote part of Argentina. One of those quiet mountain towns with nothing but a gas station, a diner, and a few dusty roads cutting through hills and pine. The place wasn't even on most travel apps, but it had a kind of stillness that I liked. One evening, while chatting with an old mechanic at the gas station, he told me about a tunnel deep in the hills. "You won't find it on maps," he said, almost amused. "The road was closed decades ago. But if you ever drive east past the last switchback, you'll see it. Long tunnel, stone walls. Looks like something out of a dream. He didn't say anything more. Just looked at me and added, "Don't go through it at night." Of course I went. 2 days later, I rented a dirt bike and followed the directions he gave. Sure enough, after winding through empty mountain roads, there it was. An old tunnel carved through the rock. No lights, no signs, just silence. I should have turned back the moment I saw it. The entrance looked like a gaping mouth, but I kept going. I switched on my high beam and rode in. At first, nothing unusual. Cool air, echoes of the engine. But then, halfway through, the light began to shift. It wasn't from my bike. It was ahead of me. A faint, pulsing blue light coming from deeper inside the tunnel. I slowed down. The air felt thick, like humidity without heat. The beam from my bike flickered slightly, as if it were passing through something. And then I saw the car. A silver sedan parked on the side, lights off, no driver. It was weird because there was no way that car had passed me on the road. There'd been no tire marks, no sound. I got off the bike and approached slowly. The car looked old, early 2000s model maybe, dusty, but no damage. I looked through the driver's side window. No one. Back seat, empty. But the dashboard lights were blinking faintly, even though the engine was off. And in the rearview mirror, I saw the headless conductor. It happened during my trip through Vietnam. I was making my way south from Hanoi to Ho Chi Minh City, using whatever trains were available. I've always loved old railways. There's something about the sound, the rhythm, the fading charm. One night, I ended up in a small town with a name I still can't pronounce properly. The train station was mostly empty. The signs faded, the tracks cracked with weeds. There was a handwritten schedule pinned to the wall, and at the bottom, something odd had been scribbled in pen. Avoid the last car after midnight. I thought it was a joke. The next train was scheduled for 12:20 a.m. I boarded without much thought and found the last car nearly empty. One other guy was dozing near the back, face turned toward the window. The train started moving, and I leaned my head back, watching the countryside slip away under the moonlight. About 30 minutes into the ride, the lights inside the train flickered. Not unusual for these older models. But then, things got strange. The sound of footsteps echoed down the aisle, a slow, deliberate pace. I looked up, expecting a conductor doing a ticket check. Sure enough, a man in a faded uniform was walking toward me, gloved hands clasped in front. But something was off. He was tall, too tall. And as he stepped into the overhead light, I realized he had no head, just a collar, an empty space where his neck should have been. I froze. He kept walking. The gloved hand reached into a small leather pouch at his waist and pulled out a punch tool. He held it toward me, as if expecting a ticket. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. I fumbled with my bag and handed him the stub from earlier. He took it, or rather, the hand took it. No hesitation. Punch. Clean, precise. Then he handed it back, turned, and walked down the aisle. When I looked at the other passenger, he was gone. No trace he'd ever been there. Just an empty seat and a faint smudge on the window. I got up and followed the conductor, barely 5 seconds after he'd passed. But the aisle was empty. The next car was locked. The door wouldn't budge. I pounded on it, called out. Nothing. I went back to my seat, sweating, heart pounding. I looked at the punch ticket. It had 3 holes in it. I only saw him punch once. The train kept moving, and I sat there, staring at the dark window. And then I saw my reflection. Only it wasn't just me. He was behind me, the conductor, still headless, still holding the punch. The lights flickered, and when they came back, he was gone. The train pulled into the next station around 2 a.m. I got off, shaking. I told the station attendant what I'd seen. He didn't laugh. He just asked, "You sat in the last car?" I nodded. He stared for a long moment and said, "That car was disconnected years ago. It shouldn't even be part of the line anymore." I turned around. The last car was gone. Only 8 cars sat on the track. I could have sworn there were 9 when I got on. I still have the ticket. It's framed on my wall. 3 perfect holes. And the date printed on it, a year before I ever boarded that train.